But the model can't determine what isn't looking at a photograph to determine if there's an issue.
And that is correct, because when there are situations of surplus land or excess land on a property, that's an adjustment that we do to the property on a site specific basis.
But in this case, it potentially could be the other way, right? It's just that there is not a lot of space there, which may work, as you pointed out, may work for our ratio.
Business. But what we've learned though is, one theory is to have that, but what will end up happening is sometimes you'll have situations where you'll have storage spaces where the storage areas are not covered, where people are able to load underneath, for a large warehouse, they're actually loading indoors as opposed to outdoors, and they make that so there's always a variety of situations, a variety of questions and answers that can take place with each individual property.
Okay, that's all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Whitbread.
Are you aware of the the information the applicant has provided on the vacancy in this building?
Well,
how much and how long it's been vacant?
We've had discussions for this, and one of the things that I asked for in my discussions with the applicant is usually a good baseline for us to make accommodations for vacancy is to see how long this property has been listed for, or how aggressively they're actually leasing this property out in terms of what areas they're leasing out and whatnot. So if I was able to get some information or to see it in my brief to see how aggressively they're leasing this property out, it's hard for me to make an adjustment on that or to look at that, because I know the industry has changed, and I know office space and COVID changed a lot of things with regards to business, how business operate. But I haven't seen any evidence in the applicant's brief, or that I was able to research in my due diligence to see if the vacancy rate is how big it is. I could assume that they're not utilizing the space, but if they have an asset, and if it's underperforming, I would do everything in my power to ensure that it would be performing better. And I haven't seen any evidence that they're aggressively leasing this property out.
Oh, okay. Okay, and I can maybe save that for the applicant then, because I think I saw some evidence there. But what I'm hearing you saying then, you haven't seen evidence, but if you had, you would have been very comfortable changing that vacancy rate, because I know you can go up to 25%, say.
And that's barely unlikely that we end up doing that high of a percentage point. And the point is, it's just like, we want to be fair and equitable to all the property owners within the city of Winnipeg. And I'm only able to make good decisions with good information.
I understand that. Yep.
And I can't, in good conscience, looking at what's happening in the industrial portfolio in the city of Winnipeg, I couldn't make that adjustment.
Okay. And what led you to make the decision to change the rent? I may have missed something that you said to Ms. Stephen.
I was looking at the rents. I wanted to be fair, true to the process. I'd actually offered a value to the agent that was a bit lower than what I put down on paper here. But the point is, the gap was too much. So I just felt comfortable that I want to be true to the process. And I also want to say that I spent a lot of time on this process, looking at this property as best as I could.
But you didn't visit it. I think I heard you.
I did not have the time to inspect it.
Okay, I understand. Yep, I'll save my questions for the applicant. Thank you. No further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Frolick. I would just like some clarification, please, with respect to the setup of the building. I look at your page 2 with the tenant verification form, and it shows Post Media Winnipeg Sun with the leased area for that's exactly what the heading is, 60,188 square feet. That's the bulk of the building, obviously. But how demisable or how separable is this building should it need to be leased out? Or is that something you can answer?
Well, when I look at the building on the front page, and I think there's two separate doors for this building. There's a door on the east side and door on the west side. So when looking at that in terms of entrance to the building, I think there is potential for a subletting or being able to use this. And like you said, the area reported is 60,000, so they have care and control over the entire space. So if I had evidence showing that they were aggressively trying to lease, say, 25,000 square feet of the building, that would allow me to see, okay, what are they asking for a market rent, and how aggressively and how can it be? Because obviously there's going to be situations whereby, there's always give and take between the property owner and a potential new tenant, but just trying to, I think there is potential for it, for the leases to be subdivided, but I haven't seen any evidence of the applicant doing that.
Okay. The other question I had was with respect to cap rates, and we've explored this a little bit from the questions from Mr. Zarnos, but the 80th percent, or the 20th to the 80th percentile, this cap rate falls within the industrial B range, as you've indicated. The other ranges, Colliers, CBRE, and Cushman and Wakefield, don't go as low as the 5.35. Is that first of all, my first question is, are you aware if those ranges from Colliers, CBRE, Cushman, Wakefield include the 20th, the 0 to 20th percentile, and the 80th to 100 percentile cushions, for a better word?
I think, I hate to assume, and that's the range that they provide. So I really don't know what they provide, because there's always going to be outliers with regards to property valuation processes. And like when we do our modeling process, we will not use sales that seem abnormal, super low or super high, unless there is a validated reason for that. And so, we don't use all the sales that take place for us to develop cap rates. And I am not truly aware of what other organizations do to establish their cap rates.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any further questions. Ms. Gentleman, Ms. Zarnowski, your evidence, please.
We also have a file.
Okay, what we'll do is we'll hear your presentation first of all, and then we'll distribute the rebuttal.
Mr. Chair, we'll need to take a couple of minutes recess.
After the applicant's presentation? Before the rebuttal. Okay, great. Thank you.
So I think just to start, I mean, the story of this building is it was built by the Post Media or the predecessor for the Winnipeg Sun. It was built at a time when newspapers were a much different animal than they are today. And so I think I actually don't disagree with the assessor. We need to factor in why it was built, who it can be used by, and the current use of it. And a big part of that is the reality is newspapers just aren't as big an organization as they used to be, or nearly as successful. And so what that's led to is this building effectively being largely obsolete. And so when we're talking about vacancy here, the challenge we have is that it was owned and continues to be owned by Post Media, who are operating the Winnipeg Sun until June of this year. And so the reason why there aren't rent and the reason it doesn't look vacant was because it was owner occupied. But that doesn't mean that it was actually being used functionally. You can look at our pictures in our brief at pages 11 and 12 of the interior of the building. But the reality is the Winnipeg Sun has 6 reporters right now. And this was office space for when they probably had 50 or 60. And they used to have dispatch staff, and they used to have a whole sales team. And so what ended up happening is this building, you can see they just store old photocopiers and they store boxes of old newspapers. And the reason they did that is because they just don't need the space. The reality is the reporters work from home. The office space, other than a couple of offices, is entirely unused. And so if you look at the bottom of page 12, which is a picture of the production space, that's the portion of the building they need. And even then, that's about 30,000 of the 60,000, and they don't need all of it. It's just, it can't be demised. This is a building that was built with a view to having one tenant. It's got one electrical panel. It's got access and egress for that one tenant, a giant lobby on the north side. And so what happened was, the reason it's not being listed for leasing or anything like that is because to demise it would cost more than you would get in rent for the entire term of somebody willing to take a portion of it, because you'd need to provide them with their own electrical, their own bathrooms, their own access. It would have to be fire rated. And so nobody would pay rent that would make sense to go through the process and the city applications to demise this space. So saying, oh, well, it wasn't being marketed, so it wasn't vacant. The reality was it was functionally vacant. The other issue that's happened with this building is, because the Winnipeg Sun hasn't been it's been less and less successful over time, is they haven't done any repairs. They haven't done any repairs in the office portion because nobody's in there. There's no use for it. And then anything that would impact the actual production of the newspaper, and there's a commercial print division in there as well, has been done. But when the loading docks broke and the thermal break, meaning the thing that keeps the heat in, and they just put up a giant tarp and said, okay, well, this is what we're going to do. And that impacts the value of the building. So the reality is, Post Media, who were the occupants until June 2024, just were doing absolutely no repairs. They were doing no repairs on the roof. Half of the HVAC units don't work. But the reality is, the building still, for the very small function of printing a newspaper, is still usable. And so that's the story of how it got to this point of disrepair. Hopefully now, with a new operator of the Winnipeg Sun who leased it, but post reference, that will change. But as of now, in terms of physical condition, certainly the economic condition as of the reference date, it was just, it's not a good building. And if you were looking to sell this thing, you wouldn't get anywhere near the 6.8 or 6.6 that the assessor is looking for. And I think it's worth then looking at the valuation metrics of how we got there. And I'm going to start with cap rate on our page 2. If you're thinking about this in the context of the Winnipeg industrial market, even the, call it, old industrial that I think Industrial B is intended to capture, it's on the low end of that. It's in disrepair. It's not subdividable. The land to building ratio, which is very, very important in industrial, is bad. So a typical land to building ratio, I've not forgotten,
is between 30 and 35%.
And this one's 54. And so what that means is, you don't have parking if you're going to do office, and in a suburban context, parking is really important. And you also don't have the ability to get your 53-foot trailers into these loading docks. And so even though it functionally looks like an industrial building, it would be very, very difficult to use for anything other than a newspaper. And so that's why almost generously we said, okay, their 80th percentile is 7.3. And so we applied that as the cap rate. Frankly, I would tend to say that probably is on the low end for this building as opposed to the higher end. But saying that it's 5.95 as the assessor did, putting it in one of the nicer buildings in this is just, it's not consistent with the facts. As we looked at then obviously we also disagree on the rent that should be applied to this space. Obviously it's unique, but we look to find some comparables that we could. So that's on our page 3 of similar and often these are actually smaller buildings, but all of them are paying between $550 and $595. And with a view to the disrepair of the space and the amount of money you would have to put in to actually go back and use this space, if you were trying to use all 63,000 square feet of it, we said, if somebody was able to pay $5 a square foot for this, I think Post Media would happily say the Winnipeg Sun can print somewhere else. Let's take $5 a foot. And then the last item where we differ is in the vacancy, the assessor said he didn't have enough information to factor in the actual use of the building. We do, like I said, 15% of that building, it's probably 50%. You've got old coffee cups, you've got folklorama passes from 2017. I've had the opportunity to go through the building. We helped the Winnipeg Sun negotiate their lease with Post Media. Again, it's post reference, but I've spent a lot of time there. And the reality is that building, they've got a room that's full of old computers as if they're going to heal. They've got a room full of photocopiers. And the reason is because they don't need all that space. It's functionally vacant. And so knowing that, I mean, that was a discussion in our negotiations with Post Media, that they recognized that all of that space wasn't needed for a newspaper. And so with a view to that, we didn't actually use the 25% that's call it the maximum. We put 15% in because, I mean, they'd have to throw out those computers and photocopiers, but you know, so we used 15%, and that arrived at a value of $3 million. And the reality is, if Post Media came to Shindico, I mean, we don't own the building, and said, "Do you want to buy it for $3 million?" I don't think we would. They did a good job. Okay, I think we're done.
Thank you, Mr. Frolick. Questions? I think you might be on mute. Mr. Frolick, you're on mute. Mute.
Sorry about that. It's just out of respect. I make a lot of noise. When I look at on page, you said this property is not capable of being subdivided in any way, shape, or form. Are gross leases not available to sublet this property?
So I said demise, and I said it wouldn't be economical to demise it. So there are subleases. The Never Alone Foundation's paying less than, like, if you netted it, they're paying less than zero.
Yeah.
And then Shaw's vacating out of the space that they were in because it wasn't. It's a transmitter. That not be the right word, but they're actually moving out of that space. So are you capable of subleasing it? I mean, technically you could, but that hasn't happened, and it hasn't happened not because they aren't aware that it's possible. They did it with Shaw and Never Alone. It's because the space just isn't effective. And remember, a sublease, you don't have the benefit of having your own space. And you don't have the benefit of it has to be less than whatever the term of an existing lease is. So when you own a building, I mean, don't tell the inspections department, because I don't want Never Alone to get shut down. But you can't sublease something unless there's a lease. So Post Media didn't have, right? Post Media owns it. It would have to be a lease, which means that the space would have to be demised. They'd have to have a separate occupancy permit. I imagine the reason Never Alone's allowed to do that is probably because nobody wants to be in the Winnipeg Sun about closing down the Never Alone Foundation, not because it's legally allowed.
And so, what was the gross rent on the Shaw property, the Shaw lease that was in place?
I think the gross rent was.
I figured it out to be $1,375
for the 1,600 feet.
Yeah,
like 1617.
Yeah, does that sound reasonable?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean that.
So with a $4 shortfall, that would make the rent $975
in 1,600 feet. Yeah.
I'm just looking at the potential of the property and what it's potentially able to generate as an income. So that's why I'm asking that question.
So yeah, $1,800 a month.
Yeah. Okay. And just to confirm, are they looking at trying to lease out some of the space that they're not utilizing at this time?
So remember, they can't.
Okay.
Right. So the way subleases work is
well, I'm not asking you a sublease. I'm asking for a normal lease. Like, are they trying to actually get a tenant in this space?
No. So we had that discussion with Post Media and said, as part of the Sun transaction, and said, listen, is this something we could do to help reduce the cost? And the reality is, not in an economical way. Sure, if you had infinite money, you could do it. But if you're not going to get rent that's going to pay off the cost of demising, providing electrical, all of that, then there's no point in listing it for a non-market rent, right? Like if somebody's only going to pay $10 a foot, for a 10-year lease and it's gonna cost you $200 to demise it a foot, then there's no deal to be made there, right? So it's
Yeah,
not that you
all
can't.
I'm saying though is that there's a lot of rental space out there that's not perfect in a lot of ways, shapes, and forms. You know, like there's a lot of old inventory in the Inkster Industrial Park, which is 12 feet ceiling heights, that they're renting out, you know, 30,000 square feet of it. And they're not perfect and they're older, the same vintage. It's just, to me, I think it's more like a business decision as opposed to an economic decision. Like business and economic, it's just, you know, they've gotten money with regards to these other two tenants. From where I'm sitting, there's potential to lease these other spaces, but that's fine. I don't have to ask any more questions on this.
The building is in complete disrepair though. Even
Yeah.
just to repair what is existing would be a costly.
Yeah, I understand. I'm just, you know, I'm just going through various scenarios. Okay, so my next question is with regards to the rents that you're using. You're requesting a $5 rent, but none of your comparables are, or let me just double check here. I think most of your comparables are higher than $5. Is there any reason for that?
Yeah.
And I sort of know, but it's just one of those things, right?
It's because the building's in complete disrepair. So all of these people who went into these spaces would have gotten spaces that are better than the current physical condition of this space. So when we're talking about market rent for a space, it's market rent as it currently exists. It's the flip side of that same discussion. You couldn't find a listing agent who would be willing to take on this listing and post pictures of this on their website and say, come and do showing. It would be embarrassing. Like it just, this space just isn't leasable.
Okay, well, it's hard for me with not knowing it, but the point is when I looked at the bread and bones of the property, or just with the pictures that I did see, I think there's potential for that, but we'll agree to disagree. Is just a question about the 10 Kingsley side lease. Is that the lease in place as of the reference date? Because you have stated here $5.50, and when I pulled up that tenancy, it's significantly higher than the $5.50 that you've stated.
Okay, well, that was a comparable that I got from an appraiser. This is what I got. I don't know.
Okay, no, and that's fine, because it's hard for us to know everything. Just for the record, that lease in place here as of the reference date is $7.25.
Okay, it's a very small piece at 11,000 feet.
Yeah. So what happens is that, yeah, because the lease that we have here in place, it's $7.25 from.
Just for the record, if he's putting in rebuttal, he should have sent it to us.
Oh, it's not rebuttal. I am asking a question, and you told me this is the information that you got, and I'm just correcting you on the information that you have. So it's not rebuttal.
I think we've got the answer. I think, Mr. Fuller, we do have the answer that they're not aware of the current lease amount as a reference date.
Okay. So has there been a lot of change in the marketplace between the cap rates that you've used and the reference date of April 1st, 2023?
Sorry, so I mean, to be transparent, we took your cap rate table, said, we think that you're not wrong. I mean, these ranges are reasonable. We just think the building falls on the closer, you know, at the 80th and not closer to the 20th. And so we said 7.3 cap.
So the reason why I ask is because one of the comparables for your cap rate analysis is 700 Mission Street. Does that have a large land to building ratio?
I don't know the land to building ratio. I've done it smaller than what exists in the property and the subject property. I can see.
Okay, so for the record, and this is not rebuttal, I'm just questioning the cap rate. Well, the land area for this property is 63,000 square feet. Just 63,000, and the leasable area is 35,760. So it does have a lower land to build ratio than the subject property. you know the rent that was used to establish the 7.82% cap rate?
No, I don't. This was information I was given by.
Okay, no worries. In fairness, in our analysis for the sale, we used the actual rents in place, and our cap rate for this property was 5.95%.
It sounds like he's giving you evidence. These aren't questions.
These are questions related to your comparables. So I'm asking you just with regards to the comparable that we have here.
Sorry, what was the question?
And I think the answer was given that they were unaware of the rent rates that were done and which would affect the NOI. So the weight that will be given to the capitalization rate analysis comparables will be something that the panel will consider as a result of that answer.
Okay, so I guess so then, do you know what the sales price per square foot was on the subject property for 700 Mission?
No, I don't, but I'm curious why you didn't include any cap rate.
Well, because when we look at evaluation of properties, we look at all factors. You've included 2 approaches to value, and I'm questioning you on the two approaches to value that you have here. And so you're requesting $47 a square foot, yet one of the properties that you use for your cap rate studies, $80 a square foot, which is why I asked the question. I have no other questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Whitbread, have you any questions?
Sorry if I may have missed this. What sales efforts have been made to get rid of this building?
So, I mean, trying to be mindful of whether we have any confidentiality obligations on this. So the sale of Winnipeg Sun business took place June 2024. As part of those discussions, there was a very brief kind of, they said, hey, is it worth selling the business and the property, or should we sell the business, lease it to the Winnipeg Sun? I mean, this is post-reference, but just to answer your question. And then once the lease is in place, consider marketing the property going forward. So that was the path they chose. They thought selling the business and then undertaking a sales process, which will probably happen in the next 6 months, was a more economical.
Excuse me. That is post-reference information, right?
Yeah. So
Okay.
No sales.
Let me go forward. This deterioration did not take place in the last 2 years or 4 years, if I'm any guesser at the looks of the photos you've shown us. It's happened over a number of years. During that time, was there any effort to sell this building?
Not that I'm aware of, and because they were still operating the business, right? So Post Media owns it and owns the Sun. So I don't think
in this condition, they were still running this business out of this building in this condition.
I mean, it kept getting worse, but yeah, I mean, roughly this condition.
Okay, I wasn't aware that it was still being run as a full business. I was under the impression you were just using it as they were just using it as a printing and distribution. But obviously there were people in the offices and whatnot prior to COVID.
Not that many people, but yeah.
Now, we've heard evidence from you a number of times about the inability to fix this property because the investment required is too great. I don't see any evidence to that other than your verbal information. Do you have any estimates for repairs to the offices, repairs to the printing room?
No, because they had no intention of doing it.
Okay. Okay, I'll leave the rest for another time. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Stevens, questions?
Well, my questions were much along the lines of Mr. Whitbread's. I mean, so you're telling us that the owner had no intention of fixing this up, has not actively tried to lease it and let it run down, but we have no evidence as to the fact that if they tried to lease it, couldn't, and to apply a high vacancy rate to an owner occupied building that has not really attempted to be leased. I just would like your rationale for that.
I mean, the only thing I would say is if it was Post Media that was paying the taxes and not the new operator, I could see why you wouldn't feel bad for them, but the reality is, you know, the reason why we're here is because we were asked to by the new owners to help them get their operating costs in line so they can continue operating a newspaper. And so the reality is, yeah, I mean, they didn't repair it. They didn't do a good job of doing anything in this building. You're absolutely right. But it is what it is. I mean, we're stuck here with a now local business that's going to be paying these property taxes, and we just think that the value of the building should be right.
Okay, I think that's all my questions. Thank you.
And I think my questions have been asked and for the most part answered. I understand there is some rebuttal evidence to be prepared or to be submitted as well, or distributed, I guess, it has been submitted. Can we please take 5 minutes?
I think yeah, I mean, we talked about the land building at length. I think you have all the information that you're going to get from the rebuttal already, so I don't think it's worth doing. So we're happy to proceed without it.
Okay, Mr. Chair, I'm having a technical problem with my computer. Can we take?
5 minutes anyway?
Yes, please.
Can we
Yeah, that's okay.
Okay, we'll take 5 minute recess, please. If we can be back here about 9, just before 10 o'clock, depending on technical.
I think that'll be sufficient.
Okay,
Yeah,
great,
thank you. Okay. I'm gonna blame it on the rain.
That's all right. Don't do you're getting a jail free card.
It would have been a natural progression, but we're okay.
It's no longer asking for practice, okay, then extend it.
Well, that takes you $50.
If we could just refrain, I'm not able to stop. Thank you. Oh, I'm going to. We're live, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. I'd like to call the meeting back to order, please. We had just concluded the applicant's testimony and questions. So, Mr. Froelich, is there any need of a summary, or do you have a summary to make?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairperson. The Winnipeg Sun has played a very important role within the city of Winnipeg for a long period of time. And I am mindful of the challenges that they have as an organization. However, my duty and obligation is also to be fair to all parties involved, and that includes the taxpayers of the city of Winnipeg. A lot of the information presented in the brief from the applicant with regards to some of the sales used and the cap rates used are significantly different than what we have used. And with that information, I did not feel comfortable with regards to coming close to a value that the applicant was looking for. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Schindelman or Mr. Zernowski, summary?
And so, yeah, we had an opportunity here to take kind of a fresh look at this property, having not been involved with it until very recently. And so when they asked us, you know, is this assessment realistic? We just said no. And as we came to the workup, I think all of the variables that we used are probably on the low end, because, you know, we were trying to be mindful of obtaining a value that was realistic. But the reality of this building is it just isn't. It's not a good building. It's not something that would be easily sellable. I have sympathy for whatever agent ends up having to try and sell this from Post Media. And so as we use $5 a square foot, a 15% vacancy and a 7.3 cap, I think all of those variables are very reasonable given the existing condition of the building and the nature of the tenant that's been occupying it since it was constructed. And so I think it would be, you know, a very reasonable conclusion to come to say that this is $3 million and ultimately, you know, hopefully as the Sun, you know, is reborn and all of that they'll be able to spend money and improve this, but it just isn't there yet.
Thank you. Having heard the evidence, we will conclude this matter and you will be advised by registered letter of our decision. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And having heard all the matters on the document today, we will adjourn the hearing.
All right, I will go shut this down.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Assessor.
Good rest of the day.
Yeah,
Yeah, you too. Thank you.
It stays dry.
Yeah.